Hey guys, now today I've got a really quick video on how to create a texture within SketchUp. So I'm within my model here and everything's looking good, but I want to change the floor texture. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually jump into Google. So once I'm in Google, I can just type in flooring texture. And our goal here is basically to get a really good quality JPEG image, or PNG actually, that we can use to create our own texture. Now there are going to be websites where you can actually find textures that are already pre-made, but I like to actually just use JPEG images for a lot of the time because I feel like there's more variety there and you can get some really good effects just using a good JPEG. So I'm just going to look through the flooring options here. So this is quite a nice texture. So say I want to use this one. All I'm going to do is then right click and save it. And I'm just going to save it into a folder. I can change the name. So if I'm going to change the name to flooring, hit enter, and that will save into that folder. Now when picking your image, you want to make sure that it's kind of symmetrical, if that makes sense. So you want images that basically they're going to have the map against each other. So SketchUp will basically put the image next to itself and repeat that multiple times. So you don't want an image that has any major distinguishable ends and tops and tails, if that makes sense. So a bad example would be, so this is an example of something that might be a bad option. And the reason is there's quite a lot of shading in this bottom left-hand area and not so much in the right. So when this maps, you'll see a distinguished kind of corner essentially in your texture when it maps. So that's just something to be wary of. But normally when you type in texture within your Google search, you do get some pretty good images. So depending on what you need, you should get a nice flat image that's kind of symmetrical in its color and its proportions. So once you've downloaded and saved your image onto your computer, what you're going to have to do is go into your tray, so your default tray on the left hand side. And what I like to do is actually select a color. Now if you select an existing texture, you're basically going to keep the ratio that texture was using and it will apply to your new texture, but we don't want that. We basically want a blank square, and then when we import our image, it's going to automatically ratio to the size of that image. So what I like to do is actually just pick a color. So I'll just pick a random color, and to find that, if you come down to colors in the little tab in the material section, so I'm going to click on this color here, and then I'm going to select this kind of little box icon with the plus sign, and that says create material. So now I'm in the create material area. All I want to do is upload my file. So if you come down to this little folder icon, and I'm going to find my file. So here's my file. I'm going to click on that once, click open, and then click OK. So my texture's been created. It's listed as material 169. So there's obviously quite a few materials in this model. And this model is actually a user's model that I reworked in another video. I'll link that in the card up there. You can watch me overhaul this model and actually produce some really cool visuals using Vray as well if you're interested. So once I've got my material, I'm gonna make sure it's selected. And then I'm gonna come into where I wanna place it. So I should be able to just place it. Oh no, I'm gonna have to place it on the face directly. And I've just pressed B on my keyboard to open up the bucket, and now I've placed my material. Now, the material is placed, but obviously we've got a real problem with the scale. So to adjust that, I'm just gonna go back into my default tray, select the edit tab with your material still in use, and we're gonna come down to the scale. So at the moment, it automatically will come in at about 100 mil by whatever. I'm gonna just increase that to 1000, and that's still a bit too small, so probably 1500 looks a bit better. I might even go a little bit more. Let's go 1800. Oh, that's too big. 1800 like that. So now the texture's mapped pretty well actually, so that looks correct. You can see kind of some of the mapping issues here. As the image is not symmetrical, you'll see that we get this kind of, I don't know, I guess overlapping effect happening, but I'm not too concerned because when you're zoomed out you don't really notice it. If you did want to correct that, I'd recommend correcting it in Photoshop. You could basically just match up the pattern, and then from that you can make it seamlessly transition between each other, which is worth doing if you're doing proper detailed models, but that's something you can do in Photoshop for sure. Another way we can actually adjust the positioning of our texture is if we go into the face and the material itself. So to do that, I'm going to double click on my object, and I'm actually in the object itself, so I can select the faces and I can adjust the faces if I wanted to. What I'm then going to do making sure that the material is applied to that face. So just to double check, I sometimes press B on my keyboard and then click again to make sure the material is on the face. I can then right click and then go to texture and change the position. So once that's selected, you'll see that we can actually move our texture just using the mouse and just clicking and moving. Also, we can rotate our texture. So if we want to rotate our texture 90 degrees or 45 degrees, we can do that here. Also, you'll see that this kind of arch that's created is where my existing scale is. So we can also rescale using this kind of option in SketchUp. We have a few other options here, but I don't tend to use these. These are kind of like skew, so you can skew your texture for whatever reason you wanted to do that. But I normally just use the scale and position tools, so the green arrow, and I just hold down my mouse whilst dragging that, and that will use that tool. So like I said, yeah, we can rotate it, we can resize it, we can scale it. This is kind of a move tool, but again, I don't really use that. This is again skewing or whatnot, but that's just another way of how we can scale our texture and how we can adjust it and move it to suit our needs. So that's it. That's kind of how you create your material within SketchUp. There's a few other things that you can do with your material here in the Edit tab. Now, one of those things is you can adjust the hue of your material, so you can change the color of it, you can change the saturation, and you can change the lightness. You might be in the color wheel tab, so to go to the hue, saturation and lightness, which I think is a bit more useful because you can tweak each individual setting quite easily. Just come to the drop down and go to HLS, and you'll see that we have these options here. Now, to reset the color, if you've made a mistake and you want to go back to the original color, just press the reset color there and it will come back to your original texture image. You can also colorize your image, which I'm not really sure what it does, to be honest. So I don't really use it that much. And you've also got opacity down at the bottom here. So that's obviously how opaque your material is. That's it. That's how to create a material using Google SketchUp. Now, this should apply to any version of SketchUp that you have, whether it's an old version or a newer version. The principles should be exactly the same. But hopefully that helped you, and that was a quick tip for you. Again, if you want to check out any more of my videos on YouTube, I've got loads of little SketchUp tips and videos going up. I also have Skillshare courses on SketchUp and 3D modeling, so if that's something that you'd like to learn as a beginner, or you want to get better at as someone that's has some experience with SketchUp, I recommend checking those out. I've got a 1 month free link for you down below, so all my classes are there. I actually cover interior design, V-Ray rendering, lots of different subjects, lots of different topics. They're really good classes and I'm really proud of them. So check that out if you like. Other than that, subscribe, like the video, leave me a comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.